Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Turn up your chains, bud.
Excuse me.
You're being detained, bud. Take your backpack off.
Excuse me. What am I doing?
Take your backpack off.
Can you explain what this is for?
Before you go on the ground, take your backpack off.
I'm going to get picked up for work.
But since we want to play this game,
Sir, are you telling me what this is about?
you're being detained for a minute. You're matching the description of someone trying to break into people's cars.
I'm not breaking anyone's car.
Sir! Get on your fucking back. You dumb bastard.
Please help me.
Shut the fuck up. Get up.
I'm going to work.
You're older than me. Act like a fucking man.
I'll just see legs. I
was like, fuck it, dude. Because he started walking that way. I was like, no.
After that, the police offered him $10,000 not to sue, but he still sued them. Do you think he made the right decision or not?
What's up, my PBM family? What's up? Another episode of Old School Cops. I got two very good guests here today. Extensive background. One went all the way up to captain, and I think you guys already know Tony was a detective, sergeant. He did gang investigations. So I got a really good wealth of knowledge here when it comes down to assessing these police videos. Since Chris, you're the new guy in the bunch right now, I want you to start off with the assessment of this video, which you see here today.
Well, from the view, the only view that we see is where he engages or makes contact with the individual. Automatically, he was forceful with the gentleman. He didn't ask for an ID. He didn't ask him what he was doing. Didn't ask him to step over and talk to him. He just kind of led him over to the vehicle, and the guy was kind of a passive resistance, like he didn't know what was going on. Didn't appear to have anything in his hands other than a cell phone. Looked like he took his earpiece out, so there was nothing threatening there. He should have patted him down while he had him up against the car. He should have, while he had him up against the car, he should have patted him down and explained to him while he was out with him. If he felt like he needed to handcuff the gentleman, he could have said, "You're being detained, and I'm going to handcuff you. Please put your hands behind your back." I don't think it warranted in any capacity him to be grabbed from behind and slammed like that to the ground at all. And then when it said that they offered him $10,000, should he have sued or not? I think the department admitted guilt if that's in fact the case right out of the gate.
Right.
If you grab somebody, the guy obviously didn't. I mean, he grabbed him, from behind in a bear hug and flipped him. It's not like the guy was squaring off with him in some kind of altercation mode, like he was going to have physical altercation. He just grabbed him and slammed him, and then joked about it. I don't think anytime you deliberately hurt somebody, you should be joking about it, especially not on camera.
Right. So let me ask you something. You being a captain, right? And you're looking at this, and this is one of your guys. What kind of discipline would you say, if any, would be coming down the pipe if you was to see this type of incident or this type of action coming from one of your guys?
Well, I think you need to, obviously there would be some disciplinary action. You got to look at their record. How many use of force issues does this particular officer have in their file? You got to look at trends. You got to look at how often this officer overreacts to things. And you definitely would do some remedial use of force continuums and roadside stop investigation training. I mean, there's several things. Definitely would probably enjoy a few days off of suspension without pay until we got through the investigation.
All right. Okay. All right. Detective Sergeant Tony, what's up? What do you seek? What can you call it?
Yeah. Chris said passive resistance. I didn't see any resistance. I didn't see any pull away. Like, you know how you try and reach, so you reach for the suspect and he pushes his hands away. Like, wait a minute. I didn't see him try and walk away. He was confused as to what was going on. What we witnessed was an officer who committed a crime and should be arrested for assault. And in fact, where Chris, I do agree, and he's right, is when he got flipped and thrown to the ground, that could have been a life-threatening injury based on how you fall. And as Chris said, making jokes about it, it's not fun. I hope that this video is used nationwide as an example, and that this officer should be arrested. There should be no immunity, and the law should be really, it should, the truth shall set you free, as they say with this tape.
I like you brought up a really interesting point. Right now, we all done police work. Where is it? And Chris, you could start out. Where's the line drawn when disciplinary actions need to occur versus criminal actions? We all been in situations. Not everything is cut and dry on the street. Sometimes there's a lot of gray area, and officer has to make a decision that maybe might not be textbook style right out the gate, but this happens. So as supervisors, where would you draw the line to where, okay, he needs to be suspended, he needs to be retrained, or he needs to be fired and criminally charged?
Well, I mean, certainly that's why you have employee files and you have use of force files regarding the officer and their past. And, if you've worked out on the street with people, I mean, you've answered calls with certain officers that seem to bring out they seem to take any incident and they can turn it into an altercation of some sort. Those are officers obviously that need to be filtered out. But like you said, there's incidents that occur that it's easy to sit back and judge when you're not involved in it and you have all the time in the world. But in this particular case, I mean, it's obvious there was no reason for any of that. And when I say passive resistance, I meant where, he was confused, but he also wasn't given his hands at the command. Now, that did not warrant the reaction of the officer by any means. He should have been suspended without pay pending the investigation. And whatever come up out of the investigation, you should follow if it's criminal charges or what the case may be. But it can be a fine line. It can be a very fine line depending on the incident. Right. I think that officers, you have a brotherhood that while you're out there working and whatnot, but at the same time, you also have to monitor what the other officers are doing in itself, because we all know and have worked with officers that, hey, they don't even need to be here, and you dreaded the fact that they were there. But you also know what would come of that if you're not a part of admin and you're one of the group and you say something to somebody, they can take offense to that and create a problem for you while you're patrolling. So we would review that tape, obviously, and the department did, and see exactly what you guys saw, and go from there. But we would do an investigation so that we cover all our bases, because we have an obligation to the individual that was detained. We have an obligation to his family and to society. We have an obligation to that officer and our fellow officers. So we have to do our due diligence. And as long as we do that, I think we can make the right decision. Whether he loses his job, he's criminally charged, he brought that on himself. But you have to go through those steps to make sure that you've done the right thing by all accounts.
Right, and I totally agree when it comes down to the due process. But you would not have a problem, or you answer it. Would you have a problem with criminal charges being placed on this particular officer?
I would not.
For his action?
I would not.
Okay. Detective?
I just want to talk about real quick. There was no remorse in the behavior of that officer, which was really appalling, right? In addition to that, the department offered $10,000. So how far up the rank? Now you have to have an investigation as to who watched this video and made the decision to offer $10,000. Was that from the chief or commissioner? Was that from IA? Who was that from? All the way up.
That would be good to know. That would be good to know, but I doubt it would come directly from the department. It would probably come from some from the city attorneys or you know. I doubt very seriously that I don't think
my
anybody.
my guess is the department would do that before it even got to the city attorney, because the city attorney's gonna be like, oh, I can't, this is on tape. You know how they try and cut things off before it goes up.
Well, I mean, obviously he had counsel. So I would say, I mean, without knowing all the facts, the proper chain would be city attorney or the county attorney, whoever, whatever agency he's with, whoever represents them would obviously be involved to make that decision. And, it's not uncommon, though, for any trial to or any case to have some offers in the beginning. Because I mean that's kind of an offer. Let's make them an offer and maybe they go away. I mean it does happen that way, but it wouldn't have been made by. I don't think it would have been made by the department. I don't think it was smart, but
I hear you, and I somewhat agree with you, but that's an investigation in itself, because we're trying to weed out corruption. And who would make that office? Is that legal on paper that the offer was made, or is that just trying to just make it disappear? But that is a good point. But that's an investigation in itself.
We just don't know that information. If we knew that information, we could comment, make a comment on it. But typically, a department's the liability in just making an offer. I mean, if I said, "Okay, Tone, I'll give you $10,000 to make this go away," I mean, obviously, I'm admitting there's some wrong there, and anybody with any sense is gonna pounce on that.
Right.
I would say that attorneys. I would say that attorneys were probably involved in that. I would find it very unlikely that they weren't.
I got a question for you guys. Obviously, the taxpayers is gonna have to pay for this, right? And both you guys, we all three are taxpayers. Do you think, right, there should be some reform on how these payouts are made, and the officers there should be some form of liable accountability on the actual officer? Because the county, state, county, city, wherever he's worked with, wherever this came out at, it's the taxpayers' money, and it doesn't come out of his own pocket. Should it be some form of punitive damages coming from the officer?
Well, I mean, the doctors practice medicine, such as nurses, and lawyers, and they're held to, you have a responsibility. They're held to a certain point of accountability. In law enforcement, you are practicing law enforcement, and you should be required to have insurance just like those other professions. So when it comes to where a situation occurs, it could fall on your insurance. And if your premiums are too high because you're reckless, then that would force you right out of law enforcement. But the taxpayers should not be. Those type of acts, I don't want to say the acts itself, because the acts itself are egregious. But the money that's paid out to those acts should be going to children's education. It could be going to the infrastructure and other things in the community, but it shouldn't be going to officers who are willfully committing bad acts under the badge and getting away with it.
Chris, what do you say? What do you say about that?
I understand what he's saying about the medical profession. There's accountability. I think there should be accountability on the officers, and they should be held responsible to some extent. However, that's a very fine. It gets complicated, because then even when an officer's in the right and making the right call, and let's say it just doesn't end well for the suspect or the person they're in contact with, that officer may find it a little more difficult to even do their job, and it may cost them dearly because they're so focused on the aspects of liability. It's law enforcement's totally different than those other professions. I mean, it just totally is, because you're going to, most of the time you're and not all the time, different situations, but most of the time you're telling grown adults that they're in the wrong. Well, first and foremost, they don't like that. You don't like to be told you're wrong. So, but you have to take control of the situation. And sometimes that control, you don't want that. You don't want your ability to do your job to be controlled. Oh God, are they going to sue me this time? Are they going to sue me this time? Because people will sue you over anything. I think you just need to. I do think you need to do better training. Do better training to where, like, the celebratory reactions at the end of that, especially when you know everything's recorded nowadays, is pretty stupid in itself. I don't agree with it. I don't think you should ever boast, oh, did you see what I did? Did you see, blah, 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 blah. I don't agree with any of that. But I do think if you have a continual problem out of an officer that's use of force is always seems to be excessive, and you know who those guys are in your department. You know it when you work beside them. You know it as a supervisor when it gets brought to your attention all the time. That you need to take action, and it may not be the right department for them, and you make decisions based on what's best for your community. Right. There are some times that officers have to be extremely aggressive in a sense to take control of certain situations. We've all been in those, but not every situation requires that, and you got to be able to read the situation better. And I think that, honestly, I can't speak for that officer, but it looks like he's just one of those that I'm just tired of dealing with people. I'm tired of hearing anything. I'm just gonna forget it. We're just gonna, he's just frustrated at everything, and that's the way he reacts. It's not good. He should be dealt with, but I don't know if I agree with officers having to get individual insurance and having to worry about, I think if we get to that point in society, then we've got major problems. The crime is bad enough. I think it will it would just be exaggerated to the point that, police are not going to want to do their job.
Let me ask you something. Were you ever in fear of being sued when you was out policing?
I don't know that I was ever in fear of being sued. I knew
I wasn't.
I knew the possibilities are always there, but I was never I never thought about, well, am I going to be sued? But bear in mind, nowadays people are suing left and right. There's cameras everywhere where you don't even think there's cameras. And, not all the time does the whole story get told. We get bits and pieces of it. So I think you really need to look at the whole case as it comes before you start making decisions. But obviously from that clip, it was pretty simple. I don't think you need to lay it all out. I would love to know the officer's background and find out how many use of force issues he's had. And does that department require you to report any use of force? Like most departments, they have you fill out a use of force. If you pull your weapon, if you pull your taser, if you deploy anything, it's use of force. You gotta put that in your reports, and those go in your file. I think you need to look at his background in that aspect too.
Let me ask you something, because I noticed, right, that you keep talking about a background, a pattern, right? And I understand that, and I base that, right, based on what was his actions currently. So it sounds like if this was his first offense, slamming somebody to the ground, which we don't know what kind of what kind of trauma or damage he did to this guy, what kind of injury this guy sustained. I mean, this wasn't like, I took another shot when I shouldn't have. You understand what I'm saying? Like, this guy there was not no reason. I just seen a lot of mouth. He was talking like some confusion. So when is it? What happened?
It was not his first time.
Right.
Too comfortable with doing it.
Right, exactly. And that's what I got from it. But if it was his first time,
I can hear you.
Would you have a problem with him being charged, this being his first time?
Would I have a problem with him being charged?
Yeah, criminally. If this was his first time, this is you're a captain, this is your guy's first time catching a complaint. He's been on the job, say, two years. He responded like this.
I wouldn't have if the investigation determined and they determined that this is the course of action, I have no problem with that. Okay. So now when we start talking about accountability, right? Hold them accountable when it comes down to what detective said in reference to the insurance. I mean, if you're following the procedures, you're doing protocol, you're doing everything you're supposed to do, why would you be worried about getting sued? Like, sometimes there is gray areas, right? And in the mix of a scuffle, it might not be textbook style, and that will be assessed. That will be you would take that in account. But somebody just walking up behind somebody, picking them up and slamming them on their head, I have no passion. I have no sympathy for that type of cop.
Joe,
like
Joe, can you ask Chris, right? I'm sorry. Can you ask Chris what he saw? Is that consistent with any policy and procedure in any department that he knows? Because clearly, if you are following policy and procedure, there is no need to fear being sued. In fact, if you follow policy and procedure and you're sued, we as a department, we as a city, we as the municipality have your back. But if you don't, training, you train constantly, it's repetitious. And it's in conjunction or it's in connection with law, policy, and procedure. So when you step outside of that, now you're acting reckless and you're committing a crime and you should be held accountable.
I don't disagree. I did not see anything that followed a policy. I would not defend that officer in that case. What I'm saying is I never felt like I was going to get sued. That never really bothered me. But once you start saying that each officer has to be insured and all these things like that, then you open up another can of worms, because there is a counterpart to this, and y'all all know it real well. And I mean, it may be offensive to some, but the facts are the facts. Anytime an attorney or attorneys find any kind of means to see a income stream, so to speak, you have to be and I think it would open up a can of worms, because it would get abused with frivolous lawsuits and things like that would tie up the system even more so, because attorneys are going to do what and this hell, they'll sue for anything. I think at that point, insurance companies, I've heard it before where they say, oh, it doesn't matter, they're going to settle because they don't want to deal with it. They're going to settle because they don't want to deal with it. Whether they're right or wrong doesn't matter. Insurance may pay it off just to let it go, to get it out of the way. So you're creating a whole new thing, and attorneys would probably be all for it. I just am not. I think that, I'm not for opening up an additional can of worms where, and y'all know this. Y'all been in the court systems. You know how this works. You've been in cases where they go, it doesn't matter. Insurance, they're going to pay out. It doesn't matter. Right or wrong. I've heard that. Y'all have heard it. I think that, and let's just say, for example, your insurance company paid out and you're like, wait a minute. Why are you paying them out? I didn't do any of this stuff. I'm in the right. They go, don't matter. It's just cheaper if we do this. Then that goes on your record, Tone, that your insurance company paid out. So you must have been at fault for something. even though you
Okay.
weren't.
No,
And
to your
that
point.
that scares
Your
me.
point.
That scares me.
Okay, so to your
That
point,
scares
Chris, I tell you what, no insurance, right? But when you fall out of policy and procedure, guess what? You pay for it yourself and it comes out your paycheck. As long as you follow procedure, we'll cover it as far as the municipality. Once you don't,
Mhm.
and don't worry, we'll deal with the lawyers because you're right. They're suing for every nickel and dime. But you know what? Let the city attorney of the jurisdiction make the changes, right? But we're not going to just hand over free paydays anymore. So you follow policy and procedure. What you train for, you're covered. When you don't, guess what? There'll be a little deduction under your paycheck going to this individual. But we got
Well,
we got to
they
stop
may
this. We got to
they
stop
may terminate.
justifying
They
bad
may
behavior.
terminate. They may terminate
Okay,
you. And
okay.
then at the end of the day, the department and the city are the ones that have the money. So at the end of the day, if they sue Officer Joe Ested, for example, they're not going to get anything. They're going for what they can get.
And at the
Yeah,
end
you're
of the
going for the.
day, it's the bad cop that has the problem and the abuse and the mistreatment of people. So where do
Yeah,
we draw
so
the, as what
you have to
Joe said
stop that.
earlier, where do we draw the line?
Well, I think you have to. You really have to go above and beyond and start evaluating the officers to. And this all goes down to, look. You've worked with people, and the supervisors know as well. I mean, it's not real hard to look at. I think they used to put red sheets of paper every time you did a use of force, and it didn't matter what it was, as far as you used OC spray or whatever the case is. There was a red sheet of paper in your file. Now, not every use of force is a bad is did you do something wrong? It was necessary. So you have to look at that. But then you look at, well, if they have, let's say an officer has 50 red use of force forms in his thing in 3 months, and every other officer may have 4 or 5. Well, the FBI would call that a clue. And then you would have to look at, well, what area is he working in? What situations he's got in? You start looking at those files and you start saying, well, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. Now, it shouldn't get that bad, but you get what I'm saying. And that's when you step in and go, look, we're going to send you to remedial training. If that doesn't work, then you're going to have to let them go. I mean, or they're letting themselves go.
I don't know.
Tone,
I don't know how
listen,
your
I like
I don't know how your
what both.
department I don't know how your department would stick in red flags and stuff like that. But me being in law enforcement for long as I have and being in the projects in the worst low income areas, making numerous arrests and lots of use of force. You know how many times I've been sued? 0. You know how many use of force complaints I got? I'm sure I got a bunch of them. But you know what? They're all justified. And you know what? I didn't care about any camera in any community because I
But
followed
that's the difference.
policy and procedure and I did not worry and I don't care about what that says. I'm not worried about it.
Okay. But do you think the officer in this video, do you think that was his first incident?
No.
And why do you think that?
I don't know, but I don't for him to joke like that, that leads to me to believe no. Do I know? No, I don't know. But you're asking me as a gut feeling. No.
Okay. Now,
It's
if you
inappropriate.
worked with that officer, day in and day out for a couple of years, would you not see a pattern?
I don't know. Is he going to do it in front of me? I know my pattern. I know what I
No,
do.
he did it
I
in front
can't
of that
speak
officer.
for him.
He did it in front of that other officer. So,
Well, you know what?
if
Now you're bringing up another good question. Should we hold that officer responsible? Should he have come forward and say, "Hey, we got a problem. I witnessed this man commit a crime. We have another
Well, I think
situation." You're bringing on a good point.
I don't disagree, but I think that would be one. Well, when IA investigates that, obviously there has to be an investigation on that. So it would depend on his responses and what took place. I mean, we can all sit back and go, well, what did he say? Did he do things? You know how it is when you're out there. And,
Hey, Chris, Chris,
Yeah.
that's
You know what? To
makes
that point,
us.
and that's
Hold
another
on.
good point. IA should not be a self-investigating agency investigating its own, because this causes those problems that you talk about. If that officer does it, that department does it, the chief does it, where do we draw the line? Guess what? Nobody investigates themselves. It's going to come independently from somewhere else.
I don't disagree. And I'm a big fan of outside agencies investigating. Like, but there again, I mean, you know, I would like to know. I would like to know more about the case myself, because I'd like to know how they handled it, and if they handled it,
Absolutely.
you know, it it's not a good video in this sense. When when the narrator says they offered him $10,000 to make it to keep him from suing, in my opinion, that's a setup, because we need to know what actually truly happened, because when you just throw that out there, well, it automatically is like, well, that was stupid, that makes them look guilty. And that,
Yeah, but listen, Chris,
you know,
Chris, to me, we all three done the job. I don't need that statement to see that there was a problem. You can remove that, and I think
oh,
the
no.
officers
I agree with
100%
that. But when you talk about when somebody throws out something like that, and it, I mean, to me, it doesn't matter what anybody believes. That right there just threw it out there. That, I mean, come on, really?
that the officer was wrong, which he was. So I don't even think
Well, but
that's
I don't
for
agree
me.
with them
That's
throwing that narrative out there. I think that you need to look at what all took place. I don't care if they offered him $100,000. I want to know what they did and where they got to. That's what I want to know.
but, okay, but why does that matter? The officer was wrong.
Why throw it in the video?
Yeah, for me, that's exactly what I'm saying. It doesn't matter, even if it's in the video or not. It doesn't matter. What matters is, was the officer wrong for what he did, and was it criminal on what he did, and how would you, as a captain, would you handle that? Like, you know,
Well,
would you?
I told you how I would handle it. I told you how I would handle it.
Yeah, but you would have no problem with criminal charges, because the way you said you would handle it, it was like I'll give him a few days on the street, right? Suspension without pay, and
Pending the investigation.
Right?
Pending the investigation.
Right.
Look, I think you should, cases like that, especially when they're monetary cases and you're looking at litigation, you should do thorough things to get it investigated. If you need to call, the state agency in or whoever, I have no problem with that. I would never have a problem with that. Look, we watched the video. It's pretty cut and dry, but
right.
I think you need to do your due diligence to walk through it.
I agree. I agree. And I bet you, right? I bet you if you hold an investigation, everything that happened in that video, that officer lied and said something different as to what happened. And that's why, like you said earlier, Chris, if it comes to the point where we need insurance, we're in a crisis, well, guess what? We're looking at videos, officers are wearing body cams, and people are dying because of this. And officers are lying because of this. So we are in a crisis, and we do have a problem.
Well, you don't know that he lied about everything in the video, because we haven't heard his investigative statements.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say he know.
You just said.
I would like you said, there should be an investigation. How many times? I said, how many times have we seen the report, the officer's statement different from the body cam information? I said, and I agree with you. I would like to see a thorough investigation. I want to see what that officer wrote. I want to see what the officer who responded and was with him wrote. I want to see IAD, what they wrote, and I want to compare that to what the camera says. And I bet you it's not consistent, and we have a problem.
Okay, listen. This is a good conversation, right? And we got different views, different opinions, and I like that we're in this direction, having this conversation. What about, because Chris, you brought up some good points when it comes down to having insurance, right? And how that can become a politically charged factor, and when it comes down to attorneys getting money. I totally get that, and I understand that. But right now, the taxpayers are paying in the billions of dollars for bad policing, right? So what about if we just take a percentage, right? So, okay, until we figure out the insurance way, but as of right now, take a percentage out of the officer's check towards the actual settlement that the community is paying. Would you have a problem with that?
You know, I don't really have a problem with it. I think that you've got to be very cautious when, I mean, what if the officer, okay, let's say he does that and you fire him, he doesn't have a paycheck, or he decides to quit. I don't, and go to another agency. I don't think that that's anytime money's exchanged, it can lead to major problems and problems we don't see currently. But as you know,
so
every time you include money, and
so the
unfortunately,
okay, I get what you're saying. So the taxpayers pay billions, right?
Department heads have to do better at monitoring what's going on and staying current with their training. I don't disagree with any of that. It's evolving faster than we're evolving.
Okay, so the question for both of y'all, right, is how to relieve the taxpayers for paying billions for bad policing?
Well, I know one thing. Chris said something about, what if that officer went from one department to another department? First of all, you shouldn't be allowed to even do that. And the Trump administration, what did he do? Wipe that all out so an officer can go from one department to another. And by the way, when we talk about somebody investigating, the Trump administration's one, I guess, body that I would not trust to do investigations on anybody because they lie over and over, as we see.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
He's making a good point here, right? If what about if we just put Doge on the case, right? We put Doge on the case. Yeah, I see you at the bottom. Hey, Tone, would you have a problem with Doge, right? Looking into wasteful spending when it comes down to taxpayers paying out for bad policing. What do you think Elon's going to do with correcting that issue?
You know what? That's a funny thing. You know what? That's a joke. That's a joke.
Well,
that's funny.
Let me. You
wait. You know what?
Of corrupt policing.
We did. We did.
To
no, because it all boils down to taxpayers' money, right? How do we prevent bad taxpayers from paying billions of dollars for bad policing? How do we prevent that? He came up with an idea that we have an insurance. They have all the officers got to have an insurance policy. If you have too many hits, it's like a car insurance. You're going to police or beat your way out of having insurance, and you won't no longer become a cop. Chris, you have a problem with that. You said no, because now all of a sudden the attorney's getting involved, and now it's going to be a money thing. So now,
Joe, let's think about something. You travel down any interstate in America, any interstate, and who dominates all the billboards? Attorneys. Hey, I can get you more money for your car wreck. I can do this. I can do that. Look, I am not a fan of opening the financial purse to anymore to any attorneys, because that's what corrupts every system. It just does. And you know,
I agree with Chris.
Tone
went to
the political side because I believe in Trump Doge.
Chris, I agree with you. As far as our government, right? We need to change the tort laws. People can sue for any and everything. People lie and sue. They make up stuff. In fact, sue. And what's those commercials at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning? You know, come to me and I'll fight for you. Absolutely. But back to the political side, or back to the money, as far as Elon Musk and Doge, they would find people who won lawsuits, right, 200 years ago, and they're dead, and they're still collecting money. That's what they would say, with no proof.
I agree with Trump and with Elon Musk. I think, look, I've told my local government that, you know, they could get rid of 25% of their employees and never even miss them. So
Yeah,
if you're going to talk about
What about
wasteful
the
government money, I'm not for the government taking any more of your money, any more of my money. I think they should be giving us back 50% of what we paid. But you know, that's just me. We're not going to agree politically. So
how does Elon Musk
the
decide
question I
that?
have is,
How does
how do
Donald
we
Trump
save
decide that?
tax? Listen, hold on, Tone. I know we just went far right, far left. I just want to know is how do we save the taxpayers from paying for billions of dollars in bad policing? The whole Doge, they supposed to be preventing wasteful spending. I think paying for bad policing is a huge wasteful spending bill. How do we stop that?
You know, I think that, you know, we look, unfortunately, I think this is something that's going to plague every industry going forward. And I think that if you investigate it, you'll probably see that I'm probably right on this. The level of employee that most people are getting now is not what it used to be, number one. Number two, that's forcing people to hire less desirable people and for certain positions. And what I mean is, you know, they're not motivated. They're there just to collect the check and they don't really care. And that's very bad. And they're very lazy. And you're seeing that in every industry. There's not one industry that's not complaining. So it is impacting law enforcement as well. I think you're going to see a level of law enforcement that even, you know, it's wild to me. When I was in law enforcement, you didn't have facial hair. Some had mustaches. That's about it. You didn't. Your boots were shined no matter what. You looked sharp. You know, they inspected your uniforms, and now you see officers on the roadway that, I mean, slept in their clothes
And
for days.
you're allowed to assault people and get away with it. Go ahead, keep going. I'm listening.
No, but you do. But am I lying? If you look at departments
And
nowadays,
if you look at this cop, he wouldn't have been able to pass any PT test that I ever took. Like this cop was way out of shape. Like he wasn't passing no PT test. So I do understand what you're saying, and we could keep going on forever and ever, but you know, time just don't allow that. But at the end of the day, man, we have these conversations not to educate the public, to educate the community. And once again, your fight is not on the side of the road, people. If you don't learn anything else from us, learn your fight is in the courtroom, not on the side of the road. You will lose on the side of the road. So take your fight to the courtroom, get home to your family, and thanks for watching and stay safe. See you later.
Trump